Artificial intelligence. Everybody's talking about it. Something nobody seems to be talking about is the fact that artificial intelligence is already functionally illiterate. It makes things up. Yeah, and it is unlikely to improve, to be honest. Lots of folks are working on it. Google has changed their terms of service, so they are now able to scan all the content you have related to your Google account, your Gmail, emails, everything that you post and run through Google. They can now scan and use as part of their large language model. There's even every possibility that artificial intelligence could replace your job. It's a bad idea, but it's probably still going to happen. The real question is, what are you going to do about all this? When I graduated high school, almost 4 decades ago, the rate of functional illiteracy for university graduates in the 1980s was 50%. They were functionally illiterate. They had difficulty spelling, they were unable to compose sentences that were grammatically correct. They were able to function, but they functioned poorly. And the solution since then has always been the same. Well, let's just lower the standards, and it'll look like, things are getting better. They aren't, but it will look like. And now, today, we have social media. We have texting. And it results in people, for example, if they want to use the word for, rather than spelling F-O-R, they use the number 4. And if they want to say, I ate something, then they use the number 8. I, number 8, something. I ate burger. All of this is reducing our literacy as a people. So, at this point, what does it mean to be functionally illiterate? And, even more important, does it even matter? Does it matter whether you are illiterate or no? To be functionally illiterate means that you can communicate with folks, whether that's by speaking or by writing, and they can communicate with you, most especially by you reading, and you can have an understanding of what it is that someone is trying to communicate, and they can have an understanding of what it is you are trying to communicate. We end up with issues or situations such as the words further and farther. I hear them used all the time in YouTube videos. I see them used in articles, and they are used incorrectly. To give you a quick example of how they should be used, you could say, I am willing to walk with you farther to carry this conversation further. Pretty easy, right? Farther relates to a distance. I will go with you farther down the road. To say further is to pursue something intellectually, to pursue an idea. But you hear people using them interchangeably all the time. They aren't. But we manage to muddle through. We understand what someone is trying to say. So, does it matter? Well, there was a study published, and I have a script. So when you see me looking down, it's because I'm reading what's on the script. There's a study published in Frontiers in Psychology, and it's titled, A Review of Functional Illiteracy. Sounds appropriate, right? And there's a link in the description below so that you can read the article for yourself and see everything that's in there. And here's a quote from the review. A person is functionally literate. Functionally literate. Who can engage in all those activities in which literacy is required for effective functioning of his group and community, and also for enabling him to continue to use reading, writing, and calculation for his own and the community's development. A little complex. That is actually from a paper published in 1978. So even before I went into high school. And it was published by UNESCO. Now, here are a couple of things wrong with that quote. First, it starts out saying a person is functionally literate. Well, no. You are either literate or illiterate, or possibly functionally illiterate. There's no such thing as functionally literate. That's a tautology. Sort of the same as, well, not exactly the same as saying the seating diagram was drawn by the Queen herself. No, the seating diagram was drawn by the Queen. Then, toward the end of the quote, it says calculation for his own and the community's development. Again, no. Calculation for his and the community's development. His own is a tautology. And if you can hear that snoring in the background, that's Priya. She's over there on the love seat. And if you can hear that snoring, that's her having a snooze. She looked at me when I was talking about her. She's a sweetheart. Getting back to the script, the UNESCO authors, the people who wrote a review of functional illiteracy, were functionally illiterate. They had no idea that they were using bad grammar when they wrote this thing. The really important question is a lack of literacy an obstacle to success? And you could very easily be forgiven for saying, well, no, as long as everybody understands what I'm saying, there's no obstacle to success. Yeah, but that's wrong. Because literacy is about far more than spelling and grammatical construction. Being literate, there absolutely is, the most basic element of literacy is, can you read and write? Can you pick up a book, Charlotte's Web, a Shakespearean play, a textbook on anatomy and physiology? Can you pick up a book, read it, and understand what is there? That is the most basic element of literacy. When you reach out to somebody, whether you pen a letter, a real letter on paper, or you write an email, or you send a text, can you communicate what you want to communicate so the other person understands you? But literacy goes beyond that. Literacy goes to being able to read a lease and understand it, to read a contract and understand that. Literacy has to do with being able to recognize the things that are going on around you and discern whether what you are being told is truthful, partially truthful, or untruthful. I've made some notes here. For example, being functionally illiterate is what allows Elon Musk to produce indentured servitude as a way for you or me to pay our way to Mars. Okay, just one tiny little problem. Indentured servitude is illegal in the United States. And literacy would enable you to understand that when someone goes to space, they are governed by the laws from which the spaceship is launched. So if the spaceship were launched from Russia, then you would be governed by Russian law. If it were launched from China, you'd be governed by Chinese law. If it were launched from South Africa, no matter who owns the rocket, it's the country from which it's launched. So if the rocket is launched from the United States, then everything to do with that rocket and its crew and what they do, whether they just orbit the Earth or they go to Mars, everything they do would then be covered by United States law. So if Elon Musk were literate, he would understand that what he's proposing is illegal. It also, another note I've put here is, that same lack of literacy is why Elon Musk renamed Twitter to X. Now, before we get too far, let me just say, I realize that I'm beating up on Elon Musk. I don't really mean to beat up on Elon. It's just, he puts himself out there and does some things that are just, wow, amazing. And he is someone who is easily recognizable. If Pierre Trudeau, who's the Prime Minister of Canada, were as easily recognizable, I would use stuff that he does. If somebody else, somewhere else, were as easily recognizable, as prominent in the news, and also did things like this, I would use them as an example. So, I get that I am beating up on Elon. I'm using things that he has done as examples. But what I want you to be thinking is, do I do the same sorts of things? So when it comes to proposing indentured servitude as a way of paying your way to Mars, okay, if you are an employer, do you put an employment contract together and then the last thing you put in the contract is, and other duties as assigned, so that when you come up with some crap job that you want somebody else to do, you can always say, well, it's in your contract, other duties as assigned. Okay? Because that's a lack of literacy both on your part as an employer and on the part of the employee who signs that. The employee should speak up and say, okay, you need to take that line out. And if you refuse, then they should just turn the job down. As an employer, you have a responsibility to know what it is you are going to ask someone to do. And if there is some thing that comes up that is in some way onerous or just a crappy job, then you need to ask someone for a favor and say, listen, I know this is not part of your job. This is not something you will normally have to do, but if you could help me out with this time, that would be appreciated. That's a much better approach than sliding in a clause that says, oh, and anything else I decide you have to do. This thing with Elon renaming Twitter to X, that would be like taking the brand Kleenex and calling it X, which might at least make a little bit of sense because there's an X in the word Kleenex. But Twitter took a brand that is internationally recognized, has a reputation, and just turfed it. Said, oh no, I don't want to be Twitter anymore. I want to be X. Prince did a thing where he became the artist formerly known as Prince and was represented by a symbol. Okay. But that's Prince, that's an artist, that's a person who is instantly recognizable just by his face. Twitter, I'm sorry, you rename it X, and now somebody says, oh, I was surfing on X today. Really? What's X? Coincidentally, not that illiteracy is contagious, but it is common. And Elon was married to, at least has had a son with the singer Claire Boucher. She's known as Grimes. And that's Elon's 3-year-old son, at the time of recording, 3-year-old son, X. And I just read an interview where Claire Grimes is quoted as saying that she no longer gives little X rockets to play with because, this is a quote, he gets upset if the toys are anatomically incorrect. Wow. A toy rocket is anatomically incorrect. They published this in a magazine. They published this article in a magazine. And they repeated this statement several times in the article. I'm sorry? A rocket, a toy, a toy cannot be anatomically incorrect when it's a toy of a rocket, or a car, or anything else that is a non-living creature. Okay, now Barbie and Ken dolls, we know they're anatomically incorrect because they don't have the lower genitalia. Anatomy of a horse, probably anatomically incorrect because if it's a male horse, you won't see the penis, and if it's a female horse, it won't have a vagina. Things that are not living creatures, there is no anatomy. Anatomy belongs to living creatures. But here's a mother who clearly has no idea of the mistake she is making. Now, on a more practical level, like I said before, being literate is what allows you to read and understand a contract. You know, the lease for your apartment, the lease agreement for a car. And that's a really important one. You know, if the lease agreement for your car says that over 5 years you are allowed to drive it, say, 50,000 miles, 10,000 miles per year, and it says 10,000 miles per year, but in the first year you drive it 15,000 miles, then in all likelihood there's a penalty in the lease for having gone over 10,000 miles. And you'll have to pay for those extra 5,000 miles. So it's a good idea to be able to read and understand the lease so that you know what the conditions are for having that automobile. So that you know what the conditions are for living in an apartment. Because everybody's all about, oh, I have a right to do this, that, or the other thing. Okay. Every right you have comes with at least one responsibility. At least. Many rights carry more responsibilities than just one. Now, I mentioned at the start of this video, that there is every possibility AI is going to replace you at work. This is true. I think it's a bad idea, but there is every possibility it will happen. And I asked, well, what are you going to do about that? Because that's what really matters. Whether a manager is going to make a bad choice to replace you with AI, or is going to make a much better choice to ensure employees can use AI and maximize their performance, there's no way to know, what a manager's going to choose. So first, let's look at why AI would replace somebody. And the big question is, we know AI is, one, illiterate. It is so simple and repetitive that the content produced by artificial intelligence generally makes novels such as Black Beauty or Charlotte's Web look like Shakespearean prose. The content generated by AI is very often really of poor quality. And for those who have forgotten or don't know, I have published 9 books, all nonfiction. So when it comes to writing, I have a pretty good handle on how to do it. And I have a pretty good handle on literacy. And I have used ChatGPT to create content. It is absolutely a good starter. You can use it to generate content, and it gives you a good starting place. But to use it without any editing, without any rewrites, wow, I would never ever do that. And the other thing about artificial intelligence is that aside from being very simple, from being illiterate, because it makes grammatical mistakes too. Okay, remember that they are using our emails, our text messages, our social media posts. So when we say things like, "you've got," which is horrendous grammar, well, AI uses the same phraseology. It makes the same mistakes we make because what we write is being used to teach it how to write. But AI also makes things up. They call it hallucinating. It just makes stuff up out of thin air. So why would anybody choose to replace people who can find those mistakes and correct them with this system that everybody knows is both illiterate and tells lies? Huh? How about because the primary motivation of a corporation and corporate managers is short-term results and profits. So if they can let a bunch of people go, if they can fire a bunch of folks, reduce those payroll costs, that means that next quarter there's going to be a bump in profits. And until those actions bring consequences, they are just going to get praised for having boosted the profits. Because that's the only criteria. Does it increase profits or does it lower profits? And when the consequences do come, well, they can just present that as a whole new problem. Well, here's now a problem that we have to solve. No manager is deliberately going to speak out and say, well, we have this problem today because of this thing I did 6 months ago or a year ago. They're just going to say, oh, we have a problem and we now need to solve that. And rather, they won't even say, we need to bring people back. They'll say, oh, well, we need to hire fact checkers. We need to hire technical writers. We need to put those kinds of people in place. And in the back of their mind, as a human being, they will be thinking, okay, AI has these problems today. But they are constantly working on refining AI and trying to make it better. So before any consequences come home to roost, as it were, maybe, I hope, as a manager, they will sort these things out with AI, and AI will become a much more useful and productive tool. I made a note here, short-sighted managers will replace people with artificial intelligence because it gives a short-term boost to profits. And that's the truth of it. The obligation of a corporation is to maximize profits for the shareholders. There's nothing about being a corporation that requires them to do good things for the employees, to share profits with employees, to do anything that benefits the employee at all. Their only obligation is to maximize profits for shareholders. And if you are thinking that that just makes no sense, you're right. It's very short-sighted thinking. Because we know, as a society, as managers, as professionals, pick any descriptor you want, we know that the most certain way to maximize profits is to make sure that your employees are happy. So, making your employee might have absolutely nothing to do with giving them $5 more an hour. It might have everything to do with hosting a company picnic where they get to come with their wives and their husbands and their children, and they get to play games for a day and just have fun and, be in a social environment. That might be far more rewarding and incentivizing to your employees than simply giving them a $5 an hour pay raise. And this brings us back to the whole idea of literacy. You have to be literate to make choices that make sense. If your only knowledge base is an MBA program that teaches you numbers don't lie, which is just untrue. Numbers can be made to say anything you want them to say. Literacy allows you to make good choices. Literacy, teaches you to reach out beyond the reading list that's given to you at university and read other viewpoints. Literacy teaches you to recognize people are not machines. Handling them that way is a bad idea. And let me just go through some notes that I've made here in the script. And this is, to be honest, I hope that by the time I'm finished reading these notes, I will have managed to annoy everybody watching this video, because I'm trying to address both sides of it. So the notes I wrote is this whole idea about being literate and literacy allowing you to make good choices. The fact that we are illiterate as a society is why a big portion of the voting population in the United States currently believes, one, that Donald Trump always tells the truth, and two, that there is King Jesus and King Trump. Now, these are two things believed by a large portion of the voting population. And it's pretty amazing that people will say there is King Jesus and King Trump when they live in the United States, because the United States was founded on the idea of saying no to a monarchy, saying no to having kings and queens, and to having individual representation. But people now, hey, there's King Jesus and King Trump. In the other direction, there is just about as big a portion of the voting population that believes sexual orientation is determined genetically. All the scientific evidence says no, but people believe. Who's that fellow? Pete Buttigieg, who is, I believe, currently the Transportation Secretary for the United States. When he was running for office, he said publicly during a conversation with his opponent that his being a homosexual is a decision made above his pay grade. Yeah, no, it wasn't. He made that choice for himself. The other, or an other thing, is that a verbal declaration determines your sex. I'm a woman, and suddenly I am. Or a woman saying, I'm a man, or people who say I'm asexual. Okay, well, the fact that you can't get a date kind of makes you asexual. But if you're somebody who doesn't want to have sex, okay, that is not asex. That's the absence of sex. The whole idea that gender has anything to do with sex, because it doesn't. Sex is being either male or female. Gender, on the other hand, is whether a given word is masculine or feminine. So actor, actress. And for anyone who speaks Italian or Spanish, French, any of the Latin languages, and most people forget it, but English has most of its foundation in Latin, which is why there are masculine and feminine words in the English language. So gender is why in French there is le and la. They both mean the, but it's le for a masculine word and la for a feminine word. It's why in Spanish you have chica, girl, and chico, boy. They're masculine and feminine words. And it has to do with the roots of our language coming out of Latin. It's stunning. You know, this lack of literacy allows people to believe things that are just untrue. And it's, to a great extent, it's because that is easier than making the effort to be literate, making the effort to read. Yes, read, nasty little 4-letter word, but you read and you educate yourself. Here is a case in point. Where I live, I'm in Ontario, Canada, and grocery stores where I live have recently eliminated single-use plastic bags for customers. So grocery stores no longer provide single-use plastic bags. Okay. You now have to use reusable bags, which fairly often are made out of plastic, but they're reusable. You could use them 1,000 times before they wear out. They also do cloth bags. Interestingly, now that they sell these all the time, I now see cloth bags in the garbage on a daily basis. You know, people have no need. They buy a cloth bag when they go to the store because they need a bag to carry stuff home. Once they get home, they have no need to keep the cloth bag because they already have 10 or a dozen or 2 dozen in the closet. And they certainly are going to never use a cloth bag as a garbage bag. So they just throw it away. So at least the plastic bags that were used got reused once because they would get reused as a garbage bag. But anyway, the note that I made is, as nice as it is that grocery stores have said, you know what, let's get rid of these single-use plastic bags. And I applaud that. I think that's a really good thing. I personally have used reusable bags for several years because I live alone. I have no need to collect a bunch of plastic bags. I'm quite fine buying garbage bags to use in the kitchen because I can use one garbage bag and have it last a whole week because I produce very little garbage. But anyway, the point I wanted to make is walk along the aisles of a grocery store and look at all of the single-use plastic containers on the shelves of the grocery store. Whether that's a yogurt container, a margarine tub, a mustard bottle, a vinegar bottle. You know, like I said before, at least people would reuse a plastic shopping bag and use it for garbage. But no one is reusing a plastic mustard bottle. When it's empty, it gets thrown away. It's a single-use plastic. So why is it that we as consumers have to bear the brunt of getting rid of these single-use plastics, but the people who actually manufacture the single-use plastics, they don't have to do anything? And keep in mind, in my lifetime, okay, mustard, everything that was on store shelves that currently comes in plastic used to come in glass. And glass is far easier to recycle. You don't have to worry about what kind of glass is it. It's just glass. It can all be crushed up, melted, turned back into new glass. You don't have to worry about it being dirty because the glass is melted So the label that was on the glass, that burns away. Any residue that's left in the glass from the mustard or the pickles or the mayonnaise or whatever, that all gets burned away when the glass is melted. Literacy is what allows you to notice that pickles still come in glass jars. And literacy enables you to know, why is that? Why do pickles still come in glass, but vinegar, for example, does just fine in plastic? Other things do just fine in plastic, but pickles still come in glass. And there's a good reason for it. Am I going to tell you? No, I'm not. I will tell you that you can't store pickles in plastic. Okay? It doesn't work. Now, you get plastic containers that you can put pickles in your plastic containers and take them for lunch, and that does just fine. Food grade plastic containers, yes, they can for a short period of time store pickles without ill effect. But you can't store them in a plastic jar. Okay? They need to come in glass. And if I'm wrong, I'm sure there's a whole host of folks who are going to tell me in the comments that I'm wrong. So, let's wrap this up. I realize I'm getting long. Because the big question still is, well, what are you going to do about it? I could give you a list of 10 things to do about it. But the only one that matters is that you build your literacy. Pick up books and read them. Make sure that you understand how to read and write, how to build a sentence that is grammatically correct, how to spell correctly. Increase your knowledge, and you increase your ability to perform. Increase your ability to perform, far easier to be employed. So let me leave it with that question. What are you going to do about it? AI is here, just like social media is here, just like rock and roll is here. None of these things are going away. And these things are going to have an effect on your life, on you as a person. So what are you going to do about it? Are you going to sit around, moan, groan, and complain, which is what most people do, or are you going to make an effort to build your literacy, to build your value, and to make you a more worthwhile employee? Or, potentially, are you going to build your own ability to be entrepreneurial and start your own side hustle, to start your own business, your own enterprise? Tell you what, let me know what you think in the comments. I'd be happy to see it. I'd be happy to read it.